everybody. I don't think I can really follow Rabbi Shei's in knowledge, but I am very passionate about the message that I want to share with parents. Chana, for not being a public speaker, that was incredible. And I don't feel like much of a public speaker myself. I somehow found myself here. So last time I was here, first of all, also, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Neshamos, for bringing me here, and thank you all for coming here. So last time I was here, I focused on the concept of connection, and that connection is the most important thing in parenting, which Rabbi Shei mentioned as well, that we have to be makar of them. I love everything that was said. So when I also spoke about the story with my own child and with my oldest, and when I started implementing all the ideas that I heard about gentle and respectful parenting into my home, one of them was that we tried to move away from rewards and consequences or punishments and more towards problem solving, which we'll talk about today. And so I sat down to have a problem-solving conversation with my then 5-year-old daughter. And we were going through the steps, and I spoke about her behavior. She actually used to, as a lot of 5-year-olds do, I believe, when she was upset, she used to hit me. So we wanted to talk about that and figure out ways that we can solve the problem instead of just giving a consequence or a punishment or rewards. So I sat down and I said, so what do you think we should do next time, we were trying to problem solve, and next time you feel like you really want to, hit me because you're so angry? And we were both sitting there thinking, and I honestly couldn't think of anything. I was really not good at problem solving. And she says, maybe you can take away a toy from me if I do it. And it dawned on me how both of us were so not good at problem solving, and also how we were so stuck in a traditional paradigm of the only thing that works are consequences and rewards, that she couldn't think of anything else. It's just take something away from me. And so I said, no, that we're not doing that thing anymore. Let's think of something else, just another idea. Like, what can you do? And actually, after a while, she actually did think of something. She thought of doing a different action that wasn't violent or wasn't towards anybody else, but that would let me know that she's so angry and would let out that kind of feeling. And I loved that. That was a great solution. And it actually did work. She forgot to do it sometimes, of course, which we all do, right? It was a process to learn that. But that was an actual solution. But this story not only brings out the point that we were so stuck in a traditional paradigm, and that also we were so not good at problem solving. And so I want to just tell all of you that problem solving is a skill. It takes creativity. Consequences, rewards, doesn't take much creativity. I mean, sometimes you have to think of the consequence, but it's a very rigid mindset, right? It's just, if a child does something, you do something to them, or you give them a reward or a consequence. And with problem solving, you really have to think out of the box more. You have to really think of solutions. What do we do? How do we solve this problem? And it's a skill. You get better at it the more you do it. And as you can clearly see, we didn't really know what we were doing. Another thing that really became apparent to me was that the message that she got was that I am the problem. I need a consequence in order to make me do the right thing. So the message is, I'm not motivated enough to do the right thing. I need something to make me want to do it. So the solution is a consequence or a reward, right? And that's really the message. Dr. Ross Greene, who's actually the author of the book, The Explosive Child, and who talks a lot about problem solving, says that we many times assume that children won't do better, not that they can't do better, right? And I think that's the message that my daughter received, that I won't do better unless you make it so not worth it for me, or, right? And I realized that that's not the message we want to send to our children. We don't want to send the message that you are the problem. You are good. You are worthy. You want to do the right thing. There is a problem. Let's figure out a solution. Let me help you solve it. The problem is not me. So we obviously, the more we've been doing this, the more I realize how she really problem solving with children really does help them not only develop the amazing, incredible skill of problem solving, but really helps them not internalize the issue and make them feel like shamed and blamed for it, and empowers them to actually, yes, choose the right thing and do the right thing in the future. There's another true story I want to share with you. There is a parent, a mother, who actually shared this story. I heard it from her. She raises her children in a gentle and respectful way, and she actually never punished her children. So her 13-year-old son was out in the backyard jumping on the trampoline, and he was jumping with his neighbor, who was also 13 years old, but who was raised in a mainstream home and who did receive punishments. And they were jumping on the trampoline, and they were, you know, the net of the trampoline, you're not supposed to like pull on it because it can fall, but he was pulling on it, even though he shouldn't have been, and it came crashing down. And this neighbor, this 13-year-old neighbor boy, 13-year-old boy, you know, turned white in the face and said, "Oh my goodness, if my mother finds out that I did this, she's gonna punish me. Don't tell anybody, don't tell your mother I did this, don't tell your mother." And he just ran off. And this boy, who, it was his home, his mother's trampoline, his parents' trampoline, went into his mother and said, "What just happened? I don't even know what just happened. That was such a weird interaction." And so she explained to him that nothing's wrong with this 13-year-old boy. When a child, every single person, and especially children, we're wired for self-preservation. So when we feel threatened, like something might happen to us, all we can think about is ourselves. How do I protect myself? How do I protect myself? And in that moment, she said, all he could think about was himself. I'm gonna get punished. How do I protect myself? Oh my gosh, I just run away, make sure nobody knows this happened, and that's it, right? And so first of all, right, that's many times what punishments do, or rewards, is make children really self-absorbed and just focus on themselves. How will this behavior affect me? Not how will this affect another? And another thing was that he didn't take any responsibility for what he did. She said that had this been my son, if it had happened at somebody else's house or even in my home, he would have walked in to the parents and said, "I'm so sorry, I just broke your net, how can I help you fix it?" That's taking responsibility, right? And the ironic thing is that so many times, we as parents, we give our children consequences or punishments because we want to make them responsible, right? We say children need to be accountable. They need to know that there are consequences for their actions, and therefore I will create one, right? Thinking that we're actually creating responsibility in the child. But many times actually it has the opposite effect. Many times it makes them evade responsibility. Essentially, when we give a consequence, we're saying, I'm taking responsibility for what you did. You're scot-free now, right? So without trying to do that, that's many times what we do. Also, as you can clearly see from this example, this boy was trying to escape the punishment. He made a mistake. The mistake was done. Now, he knew he would get punished for it. So all he could think of was, how do I get out of this punishment? And so he sneaked and tried to make sure nobody would find out, right? And that's the thing, is that so many times our children make mistakes and they just need our help, and they need us to help them do better. And because they feel that coming to us, or us finding out, will lead to them receiving a consequence, they don't want to share it with us. And so they never actually learn how to do better, and they actually many times will try to hide it from us. So, for those reasons and more, we want to try to really move away from that kind of paradigm, from just every single time a child does something, you think, which consequence can I give them that will teach them? Consequences don't teach, right? And what we want to do is we want to problem solve. We want to actually educate, and then we actually want to give them the tools to do better. Consequences aren't tools. As adults, I think many of us, because we haven't really mastered the skill of problem solving, we're very good at looking at problems and focusing on the problem and talking about the problem. If you've ever noticed, as parents many times, that's what we do. Our child does something wrong, and we go in and we lecture about the problem. The problem is this, and you shouldn't do this, and that's what you shouldn't do, and it's not the right thing to do, and because of this and this and this, and our children usually shut down at that point. But the thing is that we're just pointing to the problem. And this is not only in parenting, in everything in life. If you ever hear, once I started problem solving with my child, my ears and eyes started opening up to so many situations where we as adults, we just blame, shame, we just point at the problem, we tantrum, but we don't actually solve the problem. So we actually want to teach our children the valuable and necessary skill of not just pointing at problems, which actually comes across as blame, but to solve problems. And to recognize that the child is not the problem. The fact that they don't have the necessary tools is the problem. The fact that they have urges and desires and not knowing how to handle them and manage them is the problem. They are not the problem. I'm just going to take a drink. As you know, I'm on Instagram. And so every so often, I ask questions from my followers. I'm trying to figure out, I just want to get ideas and see what people felt about certain things. So I've taken 2 polls asking about punishments, about consequences, and how all of you, basically, all of us adults, how we experience them, and what are our memories from them. And very, very few people actually really remember the lesson that they learned or were supposed to learn from the punishment, from the consequence. Most people remember the feeling of shame, the feeling of being misunderstood, the feeling of not being seen, of not being heard. That's what stood out to me. Both times that I did the poll, the amount of people that said that was astounding. And so, of course, we all give consequences to our children because we want to help them learn and we want to teach them. We're not doing it because we want to cause them shame and to feel misunderstood. But inadvertently, that is what we may be doing. And so that's why I want to shine light on it and give you different and better tools that will actually teach. Don't worry, your children will still learn. It's a better way for them to learn that I found in my experience. So I actually remember one person in particular who was actually raised by very good parents in her own, she said that in her own words, that they were actually really good parents. But she remembers that her parents once gave her a consequence when she did something. And what really bothered her was that they didn't ask why. They didn't ask, why did you do that behavior? Where did it come from? She said I felt so misunderstood, and also they missed an opportunity to connect to me, to understand me better. And if any of you were here last time, you remember I said behavior is communication, right? So when our children behave a certain way, it's telling us something about them. And we can use that opportunity to actually understand them better and to connect to them. And so that's why this problem solving, the 3 steps, which is on the bookmark or whatever it is that you received, those 3 steps actually really help us understand where our children are coming from, connect to them, teach them, and then also problem solve with them. So let me just go through the steps with you. The first step, step number 1, is what I call hear their perspective. How many of you, growing up did something wrong, absolutely wrong, you knew it was wrong, right? And then your parent came in and did whatever they did, dealt with it the way they dealt with it, right? How many of you felt like they didn't hear your side? Like, even though, yes, you did the wrong thing, that they didn't really understand you. They didn't really listen to you. Sometimes they even may have done, like it was actually, they assumed you did something you didn't do because they didn't listen to you, right? And so that's why it's so important to listen to our child's side of the story, even if, yes, they did something wrong, right? Just to hear their perspective. Not only does it help them feel understood, does it help us connect to them, it also makes us feel like we're on the same team. right? And also that you are still worthy and you still matter. And because you did this, it doesn't make you any less lovable or less worthy. I think I said that already about worthy. So what we want to do in this step is listen to their perspective. Now, this does take skill. What most of us do as parents, when we hear, oh, problem solve with your child, talk about the behavior, is that we go just straight to step number 2, which we're going to get to in a minute, is just lecture, 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 lecture. That's what I did, right? Like, okay, let's problem solve. And then I would just tell my child, everything they did was so wrong with what they did, and don't ever do it again, and now let's make sure you never do it again. So step number 1 is really hearing their perspective. And the way you want to do it is that you want to, right, most of us start out by hearing their perspective, saying, what you did before was really, really wrong. Why did you do it? Right? So when we ask the question why, that's a judgment. And our children many times will get defensive, and they won't really open up. They'll actually shut down. Also, our children many times have no idea why they did what they did. The entire point in step number 1 is to try and get the information to figure it out together with them. By asking them those questions, reflecting back what they're saying, you figure out together. So the best way to do it that I've found is to state an observation. So let's say they hit my daughter. Let's go back to that example. She hit me. Before, you were so angry. I noticed. You hit me. What was going on? So I'm saying an observation, and I'm asking her to tell me more. Right? So that's an open-ended question, and the child can say whatever they want. It's not a very direct question. And so the child can say, yeah, I was so upset because you didn't this and this and this, and right, whatever it is. Oh, you were so angry because I did this, I didn't do what you wanted me to do, or you wanted that so badly, or whatever it is. And what you want to do during that step is to just listen and validate. And if you're still unclear, like you didn't really get a lot of information, repeat back what the child is saying to you. So, oh, you don't like when I do that? The child says, yes, what happens is, and the therapists are really good at doing this, is when you repeat back the information that they're telling you, which is active listening, people call it, is it creates room for the child to share more information. And many times there's a lot underneath, and you want to get to that. So when you keep repeating what they're saying to you, you keep repeating it back to them, you'll keep getting more and more information. Dr. Ross Green calls it drilling. You're drilling for information, but it's a skill. It takes skill to do this. It took me a very long time to actually really, and I'm still don't really know what I'm doing, but I try to really get as much information as I can to help my child see that, I'm on the same team as you, I hear where you're coming from, I understand it, etc. Okay? Now, in step number 2, what you want to do is that you want to state the boundary. Say, this is not okay, why it's not okay, if you feel it's necessary to share, just explain your concern. So let's say my daughter hit me because she was angry. In step number 2, what I can do, and this is, I think this is very important, is we separate the feeling from the behavior. So she felt very angry and she hit me. Now usually anger comes along with the behavior, right? And what we do is we usually banish both together. You cannot do that, and feeling angry is part of it, right? So here you want to say, I understand that you were feeling very angry or disappointed. Let's separate the behavior. It's still not okay to do that. And there's so many great things that happen as a result of doing that, is that children learn to understand themselves and their own feelings, and understanding that they can actually choose a reaction. And the feeling isn't connected to the behavior, that they can actually choose a different behavior. So that's what we want to do. We want to say, I know you were so upset and you hit me, but it's okay that you were angry about this. It's not okay to hit me, right? And then you can explain why if you want to, even though that doesn't necessarily need an explanation. There's so many different scenarios that this would cover, though, so sometimes you would have to explain. And then step number 3 is where you actually problem solve. So the question now becomes, okay, next time you are really angry and you want to hit me, what can you do instead? What can you do with your feelings of anger? What can you do with that feeling of aggression? Now, I'm giving a very, very simplistic example. These can really become much more complex and complicated. What happens is, the more information you get in step number 1, the better you'll be able to solve the problem. the more equipped you are for step number 3. Because many times the solution, right, has a lot to do with why they're doing it. And so that's why understanding why is so important. So you problem solve, and it's collaborative. That means that you think of ideas and your child thinks of ideas as much as possible, depending on their age. And together you come up with something that's realistic and that you both agree to. So realistic means saying, oh, I just won't do it again. That's not a solution. A solution is, what will I do instead when I feel really upset? Children need tools. They need to know what else they can do, what to do with those feelings. Will they go to another room? Will they take a step back? Will they come to you and say, please breathe with me? I don't know, right? Now this is where the creativity comes in. There's so many different ideas. Now, problem solving, the actual act of collaboratively coming up with a solution, works so well, not because, two heads are better than one, and sometimes your children come up with rocket science answers, which sometimes they do. Sometimes you'll be amazed. You'll be like, wow, I never thought of that, right? Why don't we just do that? But it's really because you're doing it together, and because your child is having a say over their own life. They are actually being an active part of the solution. Instead of you coming in and saying, like, this is how you do it, and from now on you have to do it this way, the child is actually part of the process of resolving it, of taking responsibility, of actually fixing it for the future. This is the first step in that direction. They're actually using their brain to think, how do I manage this better? What do I do next time? Right? And so what you do is you actually think of that solution together and then say, okay, great. Now, not always because you thought of the solution is now the child going to do it every single time, right? Of course, it's a process, and children are developing and they're learning, and with practice comes perfection. Sometimes the solution is not such a great solution. You might come to realize that after a few times. Let's sit down and think of a different one. Sometimes it's a matter of just keep on remembering and practicing, and then eventually they master it. When we, like I said before, when we problem solve, there are so many incredible advantages to it. There's actually so many, too many to name, really. But like I said, they are on the same team, that they feel that your love is unconditional. They feel heard and understood. They feel that no matter what they do, they are still worthy. They feel connected to you. You understand them even better. It becomes a portal for connection instead of disconnection. There was actually a mother who, her son was stealing. And she said just a year ago she would have handled it very differently. But since understanding respectful parenting and problem solving, she decided to approach it differently. She decided to approach it this way and find out what's happening. Why are you stealing? And she said it was so amazing. Not only did she say she feels that they really figured out a solution and she really was able to help him, but she said had he not stolen, or had this not happened and she wouldn't have dealt with this way, she never would have gotten to know her son the way she did. She said this was a truly connecting moment, opportunity. And she said now she really feels like she understands and knows her child even better. And so that's the thing, is that, we're so, as parents, I think many times we just want to eradicate misbehavior. We're like, I don't want to see this anymore, make it go away, stop right now. But if we can see that misbehavior is actually an opportunity to get to know our child better, for them to get to know themselves better, for them to actually develop tools and understanding, right? And to actually develop a skill of problem solving. There's so many amazing gifts in it. And if we just adopt this approach as opposed to, trying to use rewards and consequences, making it stop, then we really start enjoying parenting more, because every single, misbehavior becomes an opportunity for connection, an opportunity to get to know our child better, to really help them and set them on the right path. I wanted to say something, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Now I want to say that problem solving is not just for misbehavior. It's for anything that comes up. Right? Any disagreements that come up in the household, I love it for actually among siblings. I want that. No, I want it. I said it first. No, I did. Right? When my children do that, I say, okay, let's problem solve. And even my child, who was at that point as little as 3 years old, would say, I have a few solutions, right? And so everybody puts out their solutions, and then we all agree on something together. And we're actually teaching them like conflict resolution and how to actually effectively navigate relationships and teamwork and these skills that are just so incredible and important for life. So actually, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Marvelous Meadows Machine. Yeah. And at one point, there's, the sister and the brother. It's like this, who spilled the milk on the kitchen floor. So before that happens, they're both arguing over who should put the milk into the cereal bowl, or the cereal maybe. No, I want to do the cereal. No, I want to. And my daughter's listening to the CD in the car while it's happening. And what ends up happening is the children resolve the conflict by, I think the brother suggests, okay, I'll do the cereal and you do the milk. That's a compromise they come up with. Great. That's okay, fine, perfect. My daughter turns to me and she goes, Mommy, why couldn't they each have poured cereal and milk into their own bowls? That way they each get a chance to do it, right? And I couldn't help but start laughing. And I said, yes, that is such a great solution. I actually think it's a better solution than they thought of, right? And so, but it really helped me notice and recognize the power of using problem solving. So my daughter was actually used to looking at a scenario and thinking, right, she heard them arguing, and right away she went into, what's the best way to solve this problem, right? Right away, they get used to that mindset and doing that and really critically thinking, like, how do I solve this problem? And that was the solution that she came up with, and she couldn't understand why they came up with such a lousy one. No, I'm just kidding. So, right? And so that's the thing, is that it's really a skill, and it's something that we build inside our children. And if we could just get them to solve problems, see things as a problem to be solved and not that they are the problem, it changed my entire home and the way it functions and the way we do everything. I think that consequences and rewards are things that we do to children, right? We're kind of like, what should I do to them? What should I do to them? And that really creates an adversarial relationship. It doesn't create connection. It's we're, the outsiders or the whatever it is, and we're doing things to them that they don't like, or maybe with rewards they do like until we don't give it to them. So, right? Whereas here we're doing things with them. We're thinking of solutions with them. We're on the same team. And this is the thing that's so important in parenting, is that really we are on the same team. Yes, we're the leaders and the guides and the ones who are supposed to take care of them and give them everything, but we're on the same team, right? And so many times, inadvertently, unintentionally, we give our children the feeling and the impression that we're not on the same team. Same thing with unconditional love. Of course, we love our children unconditionally, right? Or at least we like to think so. But our children don't experience our intentions. They can think something entirely differently because they base it on what they experience from us, how we treat them and what we do with them. And many times we unintentionally send the message that I only love you when you do this, or I love you more when you do this, I love you less when you do that. So many times in my parenting course, I talk about that concept. And one person, said to me, wait, so if my child does something wrong, she mentioned a story that happened that day. Her child did something wrong, hit their sibling or something, and then a few minutes later, her child asked her for something. And she says, no, I'm not giving it to you. And she gave her the cold shoulder. And she was saying, so shouldn't I do that? How else will my child learn? Right? And I used to think that way too, but at this point I look at it and I think, what? How did we get there? How did we get to a point where we think that we have to somehow withhold things from our children, especially our affection and connection, in order for them to learn a lesson? Our children should know that we love them unconditionally, no matter what they do, right? And then how do we teach them? By talking to them, by saying, that wasn't okay. Problem solving. How can you do better next time? Let's figure out real, concrete ways. That's how you teach. Where does withholding affection and giving cold shoulders, where does that come in? How is that parenting? Right? And like I said, it used to not be so obvious to me, but at this point, it really pains my heart that so many of us believe that. And that's actually, we believe that it's effective, and that's the best way to teach our children something. But there are much, much better ways, and ways that don't actually compromise the relationship and don't compromise the, our children's ability to feel like we unconditionally love them, that no matter if they make a mistake or not, they are still loved, they are still worthy. They are not the problem. Now, obviously, on my own journey to try to implement this in my own home, I failed. I still fail. Many, many, many times. And every time that I failed, I would feel, my children would go to sleep, and then I would feel incredibly guilty. And I would blame myself. And I would feel, shame myself, take out that shame stick and be like, what did you do wrong? And how could you have done that? And you know better, and your children should, right? And I would sit in that blame and shame and feel terrible and horrible. And I believed on some level that if I felt horrible enough, I wouldn't do it again. But then the next day would come, and I would do it again. And one day I had an epiphany. And I thought, hold on, wait. How do I help my child do better? We problem solve. We first go to step number 1 and think, why did you do this? How did this happen? What led you here? Right? And then step number 2, where we state the boundary. And then 3, we problem solve. And I said, why can't I do that with myself? If I extend that kind of grace and that kind of compassion to my child, shouldn't I do that with myself? And so that's what I started doing. I instead started thinking, how did I get there? What led me to that? What happened that day? What was I feeling? What was going on with me? And then thinking, so what are actual real concrete ways that I can do better next time? What can I actually put in place, or what can I do next time that I don't react in that way? And that's when I started seeing real, true changes within myself, right? And it made me realize that just like in the first story I mentioned with my daughter, where she said, give me a consequence, take something away from me, where I said, wow, she was feeling like she was the problem. I realized that I was doing that with myself as well. I had internalized that message. I was the problem. And so that's why I beat myself up and felt so terrible about myself. But that didn't create any change. That didn't create any opening for me to feel empowered, like I can do better. So many times, we inadvertently, again, send the message that you are somehow bad. You are somehow wrong. Nobody can actually be good or do better from a place where they feel that they are bad or that they are wrong. I mean wrong as in like are as a human being wrong. We all have to believe and know that we truly are good. And that's the truth. The truth is we really truly all have a neshama, a chelik elokah mimal. That is our essence, and it is goodness. And it wants to do the right thing, and it wants to be good. And what we want to do in educating our children is help our children access that part of themselves, to help them realize, I am good. I want to do the right thing. So then how do I do it? But when we sometimes, blame and shame and punish and give consequences, or even sometimes, or rewards, we can send the message that you aren't good. Obviously, you need something to make you be good. You need we need to pull strings to make you be good. We need to make it very enticing to be good. We need to create an amazing reward so that you should want to be good. Or we need to make it so bad to not be good that you'll be good. Obviously, you really don't have a true desire to be good. That's the unintentional message that many times we send, right? But we don't want to send that message. We want to send a message that you are good. You want to do good, and I know that. And so then, it's not that you are the problem, it's how do you do better? How can you do better? And the best way I have found to do that is truly through problem solving, through addressing issues in this kind of way, where we really listen to our child's point of view, let them know what the problem is, and then together think of ways to do better. We let them know there is a problem. The problem is not you. Does anybody have the time? I forgot to bring my... 9:25. What time is it? 9:25. Okay, thank you. So in the Sefer Chovas al Talmidim, written by Rav Clonimus Kalman of Piaseczna, in the introduction, that Sefer is for Talmidim, I believe. I actually don't know much about it, but I do know a lot about the introduction. So in the introduction, Rav Clonimus Kalman of Piaseczna actually writes a letter to parents and teachers, to people in Chinuch, to educators. And in there, he writes about what true Chinuch means. True Chinuch is bringing out the potential of every child. Children aren't a clean slate. They come to us already with talents and abilities and temperaments and characters and a purpose. And our job is to help us realize their purpose, to help us hone into their characters and their potential, and help them bring it out so they can use it for the right reasons. And I believe sometimes many of us operate mistakenly from the belief that our children are a clean slate. And so it's, you come to me and then I'm going to mold you and create you and make you be something. But our job is more to hone into who our child is, and then to bring out their strengths and to help them realize this is a strength, and to help them use it. The Brisker Rav was known to be a very difficult child. And many people, and he says, I believe it was he who said that his people would have believed he was very difficult because he was very strong-willed, right? Many parents find strong-willed children pretty difficult because, especially when we want them to obey, right? It's very hard to get a strong-willed child to obey. So some people may believe that our job is to break their will, right? Break their will, break their will. No, you cannot be strong-willed. And he said that his parents never tried to break his will. Instead, they saw this is a strong-willed child. If we can just turn his heart towards the service of Hashem, then he's going to be the most amazing servant, most strong-willed, nothing will deter him. And that's exactly what they did. And that's why he turned out the way he was. So that's our job. Our job is to hone into our children's unique qualities and abilities and to help them, to help turn their heart in the right direction, to help them recognize their goodness. And then they will hopefully, right, go down the right path and use it in the right way. So Rav Clonimus Kalman says that that is what true chinuch means. It means bring out the potential of. So he says that many people believe that chinuch is, getting our children used to doing certain things in the habit, conditioning them. And unfortunately, in the last, I believe it's 60 or 50 years, that has become a very big focus of mainstream parenting. Almost like animals, right? I mean, that's really actually where it came from. The study of animals and pets and how to train them is really what a lot of mainstream practices are based on. It's really about conditioning and training. It's called actually operant conditioning, right? If you actually look into the research, it's straight there for anybody to see. And this is what they decided. This is such a great way to train animals. Let's use this to train humans, because humans, after all, are just animals. Now that's not our belief, right? Human beings are an entirely different creation than animals. And our job is not to train human beings, right? It's to actually wake up our souls and our hearts, and it's an internal process. It's not about conditioning them from the outside, training them. Like Rabbi Noach Orlowik says, you train a mouse to do what you want it to do, it's still a mouse, right? So just because you may be able to get the outward manifestation of a certain behavior, you didn't manage to change the child from the inside. So that's what Rav Chanan Miskalman is saying. It's not about changing the child from the outside. It's not about getting them in the habit of doing certain things. Although he says that it may sometimes is an aspect of parenting, right? Getting them into certain habits. But that is not true chinuch. He says true chinuch is actually reaching their souls and helping them realize their potential, helping them realize who it is they truly are. The practice of rewards and consequences there's a lot of history to it, but the way that we do it now many times comes actually from animal training. That's where it comes from. Pavlov and his dogs, right? He gave them when they did something he didn't want them to do, he would punish them. When they did something he did want them to do, he would reward them. And after a while, they were trained dogs. They did what he wanted them to do, right? And that's sometimes our parenting becomes so short-sighted like that. We resort to consequences and rewards for everything. I want this behavior, let me put out this consequence, great, now we're gonna get that behavior, let's move on to the next behavior. But that's not the goal. The goal is not just to change behavior. The goal is not to train humans. The goal is to bring out the potential of, to reach the souls of. And that's an inside job. And that happens through connection and through communication, through talking about things, not just to doing things to children, but to doing things with children, right? And so it's so important to keep that in mind because, like I said, unfortunately, as a society, what I realized, at least in my own parenting, and from what everybody else was doing around me, is that we've moved so far away from that. We've adopted so much of the mainstream parenting practices that we just do them without questioning them, right? We'll just bring in the naughty chair into our house and put our children in timeouts and do all these things that really we have to question a little bit more and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this? What is the goal that this is going to get me? Immediate compliance, it may get you that. But that's not the goal of parenting. Of course, we need to get things done in the moment. Right? Of course we have to get things done. And by the way, that's another way that problem solving can be used. If we're struggling with a certain child, a specific situation, a child doesn't want to brush their teeth, they don't want to hang up their school bag. We literally problem solve a lot in our house, right? So you talk about it. You go to the child and say, okay, you need to brush your teeth every day. What's going on? Why are you struggling with it? Or what's happening? Child says, I hate brushing my teeth. The toothpaste tastes so gross, right? Okay, now you understand why. So then the solution could be, maybe we get a different flavor toothpaste, right? Understanding why many times may help you with the solution. So having our children do their responsibilities, many times having a conversation about it is so helpful. There's actually a parent who just shared this story today with me. Last night, her daughter left her coat out on the floor. She was already in bed, her child. She went over to her and she said, your coat's on the floor, hang it up. And her daughter just didn't. And so she told her again, your coat's getting dirty, it's on the floor, hang it up. And her daughter just didn't. And she didn't know what to do. And she was getting so frustrated and annoyed. And so she started asking, so should I give her a consequence? What consequence should I give her? Should I hide her coat from her? You don't get a coat if you don't hang it up. Right? Now that is an approach, one that we're very familiar with. But somebody suggested to her to do what I talk about, to actually connect with her child first, talk about it, have a conversation, explain the importance of having order in the house, of being cleanliness, of how do we solve this? And so that's what she did. Today, she actually went over her daughter and she said, me, myself and your father, my father and myself, your father and myself, really appreciate when the house is clean. When the house is clean, we feel like we can get things done. It just creates a certain mindset. When things are messy, we really have a hard time concentrating. What about you? Do you feel the same way? And she said, yeah, I also don't really like it when it's, she goes, okay, so we're on the same page. And she said, when your coat is out, it's hard for everybody. And it really, that's where it belongs, is really hung up. And she said, yeah, I know. But last night, when you asked me, I was already so tired, and when I'm tired, it's really hard for me to do things. She said, okay, I hear that. So how do we make sure we don't get into that situation? How do we make sure we don't get into a situation where you're already tired and then I'm asking you to do it? And so they figured out solutions together of how they can avoid that and how they can make sure things get done right away. And then a few hours later, her daughter's coat was on the floor. But she just turned to her daughter, I guess made her daughter aware that she's talking to her, pointed to the coat, and she said her daughter right away went and hung up the coat, right? That's the power of doing things with our children, of talking to them, communicating to them. More than, like I said, more than the incredible solutions that you come up with, is that you have made them part of the solution, is that you have connected with them, is that you have listened to their side of the story, is that you have connected, right? Is that you've collaborated with them, and that they are now actually having a say over how things should be done, that they're part of the solution as well. Again, with myself every single day, I look at the way I'm doing things with my children, and I'm amazed at how much better and more peaceful things are when we work with children. Like I said before, when we give consequences or rewards, do things to children, it automatically creates a you versus me kind of atmosphere. And with a you versus me kind of atmosphere comes more resistance, right? And comes more, really, conflict. And the more we actually are connected and we work with our children, the less resistance there is, the less conflict there is. And we start realizing really how we all really are on the same team. We all really are doing this together. Nobody's on different teams here. And nobody feels like we're on different teams. So problem solving can be used with a child's misbehavior. It can be used as a great way to connect and to also help them do better. Problem solving can also be used with any sort of conflict in the home amongst siblings. They can think of solutions themselves. That also means that you don't have to step in every time. Eventually they learn how to manage conflict on their own because they are constantly learning how to creatively think of solutions. You facilitate the process. You don't take over the process. Right? What are your solutions? What are your solutions? What are yours? Let's see if we can think of something together. And it can also be used when we're struggling to get our child to do something. When something needs to get done in the household, we can use it for that as well. That is basically the entire concept of problem solving. There's obviously so much more to say on every single one of the steps, on how to apply them in different situations, right? And I leave that up to you, the parents, to try and figure out, what does this mean for my situation? What does this mean for my child? What does this mean for my younger children? How can I apply this concept to our unique situation? Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a good evening.